Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my notes and thoughts as I DM my group of intrepid players through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition D&D Underdark adventure, at my friendly local game store. So this video, if you're new to this series, it's not an actual play. What I do is I summarize each week's session, and then I'll give, kind of thoughts and tips and insight on DMing and maybe D&D rules and that sort of thing. So hope you enjoy it. If you're watching this for the first time, if you're a returning viewer, thanks so much. As I say a lot, this video series gets a lot of engagement comparatively, relatively to other stuff I do, which is one of the reasons I keep doing it. So anyway, off we go. This week is going to be a little bit different because nothing that happened actually is in the book other than the fact that they went to Gauntlgrym. So, Gauntlgrym's in the book, but we've already covered Gauntlgrym, in previous videos. So this is a homebrew session that's sort of ad-libbed on top of Out of the Abyss, resulting from experiences that my characters have had and actions they've taken in the adventure so far. So if you're new to the video series, we're 3/4 of the way through Out of the Abyss, maybe a little bit more, maybe 4/6, something like that. So anyway, and I don't homebrew a lot. I said before, I don't have anything against homebrew. You can do some really cool stuff for homebrew, but this kind of, I don't always have time to homebrew, which is why I usually run pre-run stuff. However, this time, due to things I've mentioned before, I felt that this was worth doing. So this video is all pretty much homebrew, and then next video, at least some of it, if not all of it, will also be homebrew. So I just want you to know that ahead of time. Hope you still stick around for the general thoughts and DMing thoughts and what I did with the characters. I know some people, they seem to enjoy just seeing how everything unfolds. So anyway, enough of all that. Move forward. Let's get to viewer feedback, and then we'll get into what happened with the last session. So here we go. With viewer feedback, I've got the +3 spectacles of viewer feedback on, and away we go. So let's check it out. First of all, we have feedback from, I don't know if this is the first time they're watching, but it's the first time I think they've commented. So Paul Jackson, Paul, thanks for the comments. And he gave me his pronunciation of his name because with Vasily, it took me a while to get that right, and Vasily had to keep telling me, and so Paul's like, okay, here's how you pronounce my name. So thanks, Paul. Okay, so he's got a couple of comments here. One, he said, familiars don't vanish in an anti-magic field. The casting time for Find Familiar is instantaneous, meaning after the creature is called, it's here permanently. Contrast with, say, Conjure Animals, which has an ongoing duration. There's a good dragon talk with Jeremy Crawford on Antimagic Fields, and Paul provided the link on YouTube. And he also said there's also a clarification on Antimagic Fields in the Sage Advice Compendium, and he provided the link for that. So you actually can go download that whole compendium. So let's deal with that, and then we'll get to a second comment. So my initial response was, I said, hey, thanks for the comments. I said, I haven't had a chance to check out the Jeremy Crawford video, but as written, what the anti-magic field says is a creature or object summoned or created by magic temporarily winks out of existence. And I said, which to me that would include familiars, right? Because you summon it by magic. But I said, hey, I appreciate it, and I'll research further. So upon further research, Paul is definitely right. So if you look in the Sage Advice Compendium, again, that link is in the video comments for video 69. We're in video 70. This is video 70. That's crazy. It does say, whenever you wonder whether a spell's effects can be dispelled or suspended, And it's talking about dispel magic and anti-magic field and whatnot. And this is on page 13, starts on page 13 and continues on page 14 of the Sage Advice Compendium PDF. It says you need to answer one question. And is the spell's duration instantaneous? If the answer is yes, there is nothing to dispel or suspend. Here's why. The effects of an instantaneous spell are brought into being by magic, but they're not sustained by magic. So the magic flares for a split second and then vanishes. Poof, when you cast it. For example, the instantaneous spell Animate Dead harnesses magical energy to turn a corpse or a pile of bones into an undead creature. That necromantic magic is present for an instant and then it is gone. The resulting undead now exists without the magic's help. So if the duration of a spell is instantaneous, then anti-magic field shouldn't affect it. So let's go look at Find Familiar. Find Familiar. It's conjuration. Casting time is 1 hour. Has components, etc. The duration is instantaneous. So, absolutely correct. By the rules, and I guess this, it says refer to Player's Handbook to page 203 in the compendium when it talks about effects not being sustained by magic, etc. But anyway, by the rules, yes, a familiar will not be affected by an anti-magic field. So there you go. And I know there was a question in my previous session about Bless, whether the effects of Bless would go away. So let's take a look. I'm on the D&D 5th edition compendium on Roll20 right now. It's very, very handy. Also, D&D Beyond is very handy. Bless. Duration is yes up to a minute. So by that definition, then Bless can be affected by anti-magic field, evidently. So there you go. Now, one of the things that came up during, and I'm still, I don't know the answer to this. Maybe Paul or somebody else can help me find it. The question was, if I'm a cleric and I cast Bless on 3 party members and they're off fighting or doing, and they're outside the anti-magic field, and then the anti-magic field hits the cleric, does the Bless stay up? And it doesn't say that it requires concentration or anything, but it does say it has a duration. So I don't know. That's an interesting, maybe I should submit that to Jeremy Crawford or somebody. So anyway, Paul, thanks for the comment on that. But yeah, familiar will not be dispelled by anti-magic field or anti-magic zone or whatever. It's a cone of anti-magic from a beholder. That's where the question first came up. Because it specifically says in Sage Advice that, if the duration is instantaneous, it doesn't get dispelled. So, okay. And then the second point that Paul brought up was this, that in regards to PCs not trusting each other. Now, this came out from another question, I believe from Cody, who followed up. We'll get to here in a moment. But he was talking about how it seems like the players, maybe not the players themselves, but the characters of the players in a new campaign he was starting were being very untrustworthy with each other and backstabby and that sort of thing. And, I'd given my thoughts in I think the previous video on how I would approach that. And Paul said, in regards to PCs not trusting each other or working together, yes, you can show the negative consequences of the PC's actions. He said, but you can also prompt the players with leading questions. And here's an example. He said, despite seeming standoffish, what clues do we see that you grudgingly like and respect the other party members? And then he said to reward the players with inspiration when they exhibit the behaviors you want to see. And of course, when there's a problem in the game, nothing beats actually talking to your players. I agree with that. Sometimes, as in the game of D&D and as in life, sometimes just trying to talk about it. Say, hey, am I seeing this? Maybe I'm misunderstanding or whatever, but, is this what's going on? Or, and try privately before you openly, bring it up if it's a real problem or whatever. And then if it continues to be an issue, you can take it to more of the table or whatever. But talking to people, a lot of times, I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10 will help. And usually a lot of times it's a misunderstanding. So, and then 3, he said, I've decided the bridges in Karazakar's Maw are only 5 feet wide. I made them 10 feet wide, or maybe that's what the book says. I can't remember. He says, why make it easy on them? And have no handrails. Karazakar laughs at your puny OSHA regulations. And for those of you who don't know, OSHA is like a American safety organization. I think it's a Federal Office of Safety and Hazardous something. I don't know. There's all these regulations in the workplace in America, and that's what OSHA is. So, so funny. Okay, so I did go back and, I said, hey, I'll look into the Jeremy Crawford thing, and Paul was right. Now, my thing on the leading questions was, and before I put this out there, let me be really clear that every DM and every party is different. Every group of players is different. Okay. So my take on this is subjective. It's not a factual, objective thing. But I normally don't use leading questions because leading questions, I mean, everybody does occasionally, right? But if I'm really thinking about it, like, how do I want to address this situation? I probably won't use a leading question. Because I don't want to imply behavior on thought or thoughts on behalf of a character that might not actually be there. And, I just let the role play be what it is. And if they don't trust each other, if the PCs don't trust each other, they don't trust each other. But I did say, if that leads to out of character behavior being backstabby, then I will step in and try to mediate. So if it spills over into the out of character dynamics between the players, I'll try to mediate somehow. Even though as the DM, I'm not dad, I'm not mom, but if it's affecting everybody's enjoyment of the game, I'll try to address it somehow. And how I would address it would depend on that situation. We've talked about this before, how do you handle parties that are starting to become toxic or whatever. I actually had a fairly good discussion on that in this video series recently. So, now what I would do with the way Paul approaches it, I probably wouldn't say what clues do we see that you grudgingly like and respect the other party members, but I might say, is there anything about the other party members that you respect? Which was probably what Paul was trying to get at, I would imagine. He just phrased it differently. But again, even if you asked it exactly like Paul phrased it, that's fine. Every DM, every group has its own way. I'm just saying here's how I personally would handle it. And then after I gave my thoughts, I did say you're nasty with on the 5 feet wide bridges and no handrails and all that. And then Paul did follow up on the leading question. He said a good leading question doesn't proscribe character behavior, which means prevent behavior or something like that, but inspires the player to think about their character's place in the fiction in a way they haven't done before. So yeah, I 100% agree with that, Paul. Asking questions and building on the answers is a good DM skill to have. In the case of a DM not enjoying the game or all the PCs mistrust each other, again, the best thing for that DM to do is talk to their players. Once everyone is on the same page about what kind of game they want to be in, asking leading questions is an excellent way to gently remind players to stay on track. Yeah, I agree with all that, Paul. And if you start the game and you're a few sessions in and it's really clear that all of the players want to have a different tone of a game than the DM wants to have, it's totally fine to say, guys, or gal, everybody, that's not the game that I want to run. You can keep doing it, but I think I might step down as DM. And, hopefully you could do that in a way that doesn't seem like you're just like, well, mad. And you're just like, no, I'm not mad at all. It's cool. You guys can do whatever. This isn't the game I'm wanting to play. Just kind of some people want to watch a certain movie and somebody else doesn't. It doesn't mean that everybody's mad at each other or whatever. And then maybe somebody in that group can step up and become the DM. Or maybe the players will evaluate, well, how important is it for us to play this style of party? Because the DM doesn't want to do that, As I've said before, the DM on a certain level is a player. They want to have fun too. They're not a vending machine to just give you whatever you want. Okay, everybody's working together, including the DM, for everybody to have fun. Okay, and enough of that. So, thanks, Paul. Appreciate your thoughts. So Vasily said, hey, you said my name right the very first time in this video. Yay! And then he said, you got well dressed for a beholder fight. He's talking about that it was ugly tie day the day that I recorded the video. So I was still wearing my tie, my periodic table tie, which I was disappointed that it didn't get more reactions out of people. People liked my tie, so I failed, but I'll try harder next time. Basically, the first set of dice is... Oh, and he says, regarding crits, sometimes rolling double dice is still underwhelming due to chance. Agreed. You could roll 2 1s or whatever. So I use this system I read about online. This is Vasily talking. First of all, Vasily, I want to let you know that I tried to reply several times to your comment and say, sounds great, but it just wouldn't let me. Let me see if I can do it now. See if it'll let me now. Is it letting me? Now it's letting me. I don't know. The other day, I just said I don't like that crit method, but it wouldn't let me the other day, so I wasn't ignoring you. I try to respond to questions before video time or feedback. So here is the crit method that Vasily uses. It says basically the first set of dice is maxed. The player then rolls the second set. For example, if the attack deals 2d8 plus 2 and they crit, the players deals 16, which would max the first set. So you're going to, the normal damage you would be dealing with would be 2d8 plus 2. So because you crit, you're going to roll that 2d8 twice. You're going to end up rolling 4 d8s, essentially. So he maxes the first set to be 16 points of damage, and then he rolls the 2d8, and then adds the plus 2, because you only do the modifier once in a crit. So this makes it feel like a strong hit always, instead of rolling 4 1s and doing 6 damage on a crit. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. He said, so far it's worked great for my players, and they love that system. So if you remember where you got that system, Vasily, you may know I read stuff all the time. I'm like, I don't remember where I read that. But if you remember, let me know, and I'll try to give credit in a future video. There's nothing wrong with that. My guess is the only thing I would say, and I'm not saying don't use this crit system, I'm just saying in general, before you go messing around with dice and how the dice work in D&D, remember that all of it has been play tested pretty hard. And there's, there's probably not just some random reason why they're going with the types of dice they're doing for different stuff. I see discussions online all the time on like Facebook or whatever, and they're talking about drastically changing how things work and the way dice work or whatever. And I'm always like, well, just remember that the entire, D&D engine has been play tested and balanced. So if you alter something significantly, that could ripple out and have unintended consequences, either plus or minus, like maybe make the game too easy or make the game too hard or something. That being said, I don't think maxing the first set that you roll in a crit is going to throw things off too badly. So not a bad crit system. It'd be interesting to see what, if they may have play tested that. I don't know. I mean, because it's a good idea. So let's see. D1 Morto said, I'm a little worried that when my players reach the maze engine, they will just push it into the lava and move on. And this is coming, the maze engine, the Modron, the duo drone Modron that they got from the Beholder's lair, and the Beholder himself, are talking about maze engine, and then the Beholder called it a maze engine, and the Modron called it an orderer. I think it lets you change reality on a certain level. So we haven't got to that point yet in the adventure. So I won't address the maze engine specifically, but I will say that, in general in D&D, try to, if something's that important, like if they push the maze engine into the lava, which, I mean, no plan, Murphy's Law, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The players are going to do stuff you don't expect. Remember, it's a game of imagination and creativity, so you can, you don't want to put them on rails, but have a backup plan. Think to yourself, well, if they push the maze engine into the lava, what do I do? Do I make it so they can't? Do I make it so that the maze engine protects itself? Do I make it so that the lava doesn't damage the maze engine? Do I have something else happen? That it alters reality. So the maze engine splashes into the lava and is destroyed, and then it immediately reappears where it was. I don't know. I mean, I haven't even really deeply studied that part of the adventure. What I'm saying is have a backup plan, and sometimes you just got to do stuff on the fly, you know, um, you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And, you want to let the players have player agency, take whatever, actions they want. But if something's absolutely critical to the plot, you've got to be able to somehow get it back on task. Maybe if you have plenty of time and you enjoy the same homebrew, finding another maze engine, or something else, or go back to Vizeron and they destroyed the maze engine. And he's like, wow, okay, we're going to have to do this instead. I mean, which again will probably involve some homebrewing. Thing is, main thing, D1 more to remember, it's a game of imagination. I mean, you don't want to think that you're like an iron-fisted dictator, but at the end of the day, as DM, you're in control of the game. As far as the story that's happening, that stuff that's being presented to the players that they must react to. So trust yourself to come up with a cool way to recover from that. And I don't mean that in the motivational poster, like you have what you need. I'm just saying you're DM. If you've DM'd them up to that point, you've DM'd them up through some craziness already in this adventure. You've got the chops. You'll figure something out. So, but always have a backup plan. And if you can think of it, the players can too. So if you've already thought of that scenario, just think, well, how do I prevent that? Or how do I recover from that game wise? Without, putting the players completely on rails or taking away their ability to, have agency in the game. All right, Cody Lloyd. He said, thank you for answering my question on last week's video. Sorry I didn't comment. This is what I was talking about where, he had written in and said, my players, I think, might be being a little bit backstabby with each other. It took me a while to get back to him. So I was like, hey, I don't know if your follow-up sessions already happened or not, but here's what I would do. And he said, I had my session yesterday. So yeah, I was too late in answering for him to read it before he had the session, but he said, I may have jumped the gun on my reaction. Looks like everyone may have just been feeling out the group. This last session went just fine and everyone had fun. Remember, that's the point. Everyone's there to have fun. That doesn't mean everybody gets to have the exact game they want, because if you have 5 different people all saying, oh, I want the game to be this, that's where the DM comes in. But you do want everybody to have fun. I'm not exactly a new DM, but have mostly just run one-shots with no real consequences to the player's action. But in this is the first campaign he's run, so he's still kind of nervous. That's, it scales. A lot of the same stuff that you have to deal with in an adventure, you're going to deal with in a campaign. A campaign is just one long adventure or series of adventures. I kind of like what Pathfinder does. Not that I've played through one, but I like the concept of it. They have these adventure paths where it's 6 standalone adventures that you can play together as a campaign. I like that idea. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, I said, hey man, I'm glad to hear it worked out. And yeah, sometimes it just takes a couple of sessions to see if you have a trend or not. So that's another good point, like Paul brought up earlier in his comments and talking with Cody now. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a DM, just like in real life, is do nothing for the moment and wait and see what happens. Let it breathe a little bit. Because if Cody or somebody else, in a similar situation had, like really come in and said, hey, we got to do something about this, that could have negatively affected everybody's, like, oh, I don't know if I want to play in this game or not. Right. So yeah. So next week it wasn't a problem. There's an old saying that I like. It applies to, I usually hear it at work, but it kind of applies to life and D&D or whatever. When an emergency comes up or a problem comes up, write it down on a piece of paper, put it in a box. At the end of a week, open up the box and see what stuff is still a problem. And, 80-90% of it's probably no longer even an issue. So, okay, Valendrave wrote in. And he's following up on what I was talking about. I basically in my campaign at the store, because I run at a store, I'm more flexible than maybe if I was running a campaign in my home among like close personal friends. But it's the Player's Handbook, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and Xanathar's Guide to Everything. If a race or a class or whatever background, what have you, is in one of those 3 books, then it flies in our campaign. If it's not in one of those books, then it's not in our campaign. And I just leave it like that. So, and that just makes it easy on everybody, including me. Everybody knows what the boundaries are, and it keeps me from having to constantly review some weird unearthed arcana or something that somebody found on the internet, and keeps me from going, no, or, oh, well, I allowed that, but I'm not allowing it here. So now this player's mad at that player or mad at me because they got their thing, but just those 3 books. And I think that's fine. I mean, that's 3 books worth of races and classes and backgrounds and all that good stuff, spells, whatever. So, and then Valendrave said, Shane, I disallow the Dragonborn because I absolutely hate them and don't think they should have ever been part of the game, especially when the template for a half dragon is much cooler. So I'm not a big Dragonborn. I think that may have been what kicked off this comment last video I was talking. I'm not a big fan of the Dragonborn either. I don't necessarily mind having them in the game as a race or opponents or whatever, but as player characters, it feels weird to me. Maybe if you're a new D&D player, it feels as natural as a halfling or an elf. But for me, with my background in role-playing games in D&D and fantasy literature and all that, it just feels a little weird. And I always end up thinking about the Draconians from Dragonlance. And then he goes on to say, he said, the template for the half-dragon is much cooler. Even Wizards of the Coast sort of disavowed them, talking about Dragonborn, when they fixed the 4th edition stuff to repair the Forgotten Realms for 5th edition. I just pretend they don't exist. You can do that. Any party, any DM or whatever, you can say there are no Dragonborn in our campaign. And somebody's like, but you're in the book. Be like, yep, but this is the game we're playing. You can do that. When I want a half dragon race for anything, I use the actual half dragon from the monster manual. I will admit that the Dragonborn have fallen victim to my total hatred of 4th edition. Remember, this is Valendrave. I've never played 4th edition. I've listened to podcasts of it. I've heard it discussed a lot. I've read it a little bit. I've got the Redbox version up there in my shelf. And my impression of it, I've heard other people, say, yeah, that's their impression of it too after playing it. The combat seems super tactical and cool. However, it seems like the combat takes a long time, and it does seem like that they tried to take the world of MMO video games like World of Warcraft and smush it on top of D&D, which I understand why they did that. Like Wizards of the Coast is like, there's millions of people playing World of Warcraft and EverQuest and all this stuff. Let's try to get them into D&D. I get the thought behind it. I think it's a flawed concept because they're different mediums, but I understand why they did it. Anyway, going. I don't hate 4th edition. I've literally never played it. I might play it and love it. But there's like all these powers with cooldowns. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about 4th edition. One of these days I'll play it so I can have a more informed opinion. He says, anyway, I will admit that the Dragonborn have fallen victim to my total hatred of 4th edition. Laugh out loud. P.S. Kobolds are on page 119 of Volos. So I was talking about last video, and this plays into the books I allow for my campaign and those that I don't. I said Volos is not, I don't use Volos for playable races. And I looked in the list of playable races for Volos, and they're not even listed in there. However, in page 119 of Volos, as Valendrave is pointing out here, the kobolds are fully statted out like the playable races, although technically he says technically I'm correct, they're not listed with the other playable races, but they're separate with the other main monster races. So anyway, so here's the thing. What kicked all this off is, even though I've clearly told my players many times what the available options are, they'll always, hey, can I do this? Because maybe they forgot, or maybe they're not paying attention, or maybe they're just hoping they can slip one by. Who knows? I'm not going to deal with the motives. I'm going to deal with the behavior. Um, and one of my players, his character died, got killed by the beholder, and he was like, I want to play a kobold rogue. And I was like, so I said, well, these are the 3 books that are allowed. And then he came back and said, I want to play a kobold rogue. And then I had to go look it up, and I said, well, you can't. Sorry, that's not one of the allowed things. And then he was like, okay, cool. So he made a human rogue. So the other principle there is sometimes your players will ask to do stuff that you've already established as you can't do. But, again, try to deal with the behavior, not the motive, because you don't know what the motive is. All right, that's it for viewer feedback. So let me take off my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we'll get on with a recap of what happened last time on Out of the Abyss with Shame Plays. So when we last left our heroes, adventurers, heroes sometimes? Anyway, they had defeated Karazakar the Beholder in Karazakar's Maw in the vast Oblivium, and they had left with a bunch of refugees of slaves that some of them wanted to leave, some of them, it was the only home they'd ever known, some of them were addled in the head, multiple different races. The Orogs and the goblins had struck out on their own, and the party had been kind enough to provide them with a map on how to get out. Now, the book says that any slaves or refugees or whatever that leave on their own without the PCs helping, will die in the worm writhings. But as DM, you can do whatever you want. I'll let the Orogs and the goblins' fate be unknown. But the refugees that they took with them, and we kind of played it like they just took everybody. Nobody stayed. Even those that were like, I've never known any other life. Karazakar was my, little G god, basically. They were taken along by others who knew better. Like, we really need to leave. This is not good to stay here. So, they all leave. And now one thing I touched on this last video. But again, I mean, there's a whole list, and we went over it last video. You can find it in the chapter for Karazakar's Maw, or it's the Worm Writhings chapter that covers the Worm Nursery and Karazakar's Maw, the Vast Oblivium. There's a whole host of new possible NPCs to add to the expedition, and I specifically decided I don't want any more NPCs in the expedition. I just don't. I don't want to deal with that anymore. I've dealt with it a lot in this campaign, a lot of NPCs in both parts, part 1 and part 2. I personally don't want to. But if you're a DM who wants to deal with more NPCs, or if the players seem like they really want to recruit some of these slaves into the expedition to replenish, lost members or to make it stronger or whatever, I mean, feel free. It gives details on, they're suffering exhaustion and this and that and the other, but it does give notes in the book on how to bring them into the expedition. I'm kind of like, personally, enough is enough on keeping up with all these NPCs. So, but they do make good fodder, cannon fodder to, they're like red shirts, and it's also a good way to help summarize and montage travel, because you can say the expedition is dealing with the small stuff in the travel, all the little minor encounters that happen on the edge of expedition. The expedition's handling it, and you're only called in on the big stuff. So that does make it easier to montage. And in fact, that's what we did. Because it's several days travel, I think 2 or 3 weeks from the Worm Writhings where they were at in the Worm Writhings to Gauntlgrym. I think I looked it up, and it was 2 or 3 weeks worth of travel, not even including having to forage for the refugees and all that. So I just montaged that. I summarized, said you guys traveled. You're now at Gauntlgrym. Because it was time in the story to get back to Gauntlgrym. Now, I want to be really clear before I move forward that everything that happens in this video and the next is homebrew stuff. So this is stuff that has come out of like role-playing moments that have happened previously. I'm homebrewing some stuff. 1, to have some fun, but 2, also to, kind of reinforce the fact to my players that actions you take in the game can have consequences. And if you act spontaneously silly or goofy, as DM, I'm not going to say you can't do that, but I am going to let consequences happen. So we're going back to Gauntlgrym to deal with the Moon Elf's very rash move in Mantle Dareth. So they show up at Gauntlgrym, and they had used the Sending Stones. Remember, I gave them Sending Stones. Again, that's not in the book, but I recommend, some sort of Sending Stone, some sort of limited teleportation, as I've discussed in previous video, because the Underdark is so big. And unless you just want to do every day of travel like the books, I mean, wow, it's just really big. So, some limited teleportation, not so much that it's a complete, twink of the game, or, that it just completely breaks the spirit of how difficult this campaign is mentally on the players and the characters. And then some Sending Stones. So they had used Sending Stones. Hey, we're bringing refugees, we're coming back, etc. And so when they arrive at Gauntlgrym, in the Underdark, remember the Gauntlgrym has both a surface presence and an Underdark presence. They show up and the refugees are welcomed. There's not any races among the refugees that would not be welcomed. The goblins and the Arog struck out on their own, knowing they're like, we're not going to Gauntlgrym. So they're not idiots. And they show up, and the party is received with, it's polite and cordial and diplomatic, but there's a little bit of a tenseness and a coldness in the air that they notice. And they're asked to stay. The refugees are taken in, and as they're going through the various areas of Gauntlgrym to get to their rooms, they notice more drow presence than normal. And a lot of these drow appear to be of sort of the servant type. So they're also asked for security reasons. Say security here is tight due to what's happening right now. Please stay in your rooms unless you're called for, unless you're summoned. So that could be taken one of two ways, and I left it very ambiguous. Like, are they really worried about the protection, or are they in trouble? And the answer is both. Like, right? I mean, this is a very serious thing that's happening as a result of what Elif did. So after staying in their quarters, and they were brought what they wanted, they were treated well and very politely. Like I said, there was just a little bit of in the air, a little tension, a little coldness, with good reason, because the drow are using this incident as a diplomatic excuse to apply massive pressure on Gauntlgrym and to unify the drow together against the dwarves in the Underdark. It's very serious. I mean, this is a very serious threat on Bruenor and his people. And it's something they have to deal with while all the madness is going on. There's already a threat, and now things have gotten pear-shaped because now they have to deal with this other situation, which is also, being exacerbated by the madness. But there's an existential threat to Gauntlgrym at this point. It has given the drow a pretext for all the major houses to come together, unified against the dwarves, because none of the races really in the Underdark want the surface dwarves in Gauntlgrym. It had been lost to the dwarves for, I guess, centuries, a long time, and the surface dwarves recently reclaimed Gauntlgrym, and they're still working on claiming parts of it. And the Underdark, especially the drow, I don't want them there. We do not want you here. We do not want you in our neighborhood. If we can get you out of our neighborhood, we will. So they're really using this to hammer Bruenor diplomatically. And the drow are playing it off like, we're trying to work this out diplomatically and not go to war, but really their ultimate goal is to get the dwarves to leave. But if they have to go to war, maybe they will. Maybe the madness in the air will tip it even that much further, so that the drow would go to outright war with Gauntlgrym, King Bruenor. And remember, again, none of this is in the book. This is me homebrewing. I don't homebrew a lot, mainly just due to time reasons. And, I'm fine running prepackaged adventures, have a lot of fun doing them. And my players do too. But this session, and the next are homebrew sessions. So, anyway, so the next day they're summoned uh, to meet with Bruenor and the faction representatives. Now, none of the Drow are at this meeting. It actually ends up being 2 meetings and 3 meetings before everything's said and done. Uh, but it's in sort of official chambers of King Bruenor, but it is not his throne room. And we used this. The first time they came to Gauntlgrym, there was sort of a chambers that he met with them in before, they went like to the feast and throne rooms and all that stuff. Same chamber, so it's still official and it's still the king, but it's not the throne room. And the reason that King Bruenor is doing this, he's got to deal with all of this in his capacity as king, but also as an adventurer in heart. And he also kind of set all this stuff in motion. So he wants to get to the bottom of everything that happened before they have the official meetings with the Drow in the throne room. So he calls everybody, and the characters, I gave them an opportunity, the night before, and overnight and during the day before they were summoned to, what are you doing? And they told me their various things. And I have a very creative player, and he's the one that played Grimy the dwarf that got disintegrated by the Beholder. So he's come up with this new human rogue character, who's a very shady type of, like impersonator type character, where he passes himself off as nobility, as I can't remember off the top, Lord something, which is not really his character's name. His backstory is really good, and he has these fake paper. Well, they're genuine papers of nobility, but they're not his. He like blackmailed somebody into getting them, and he also has a deed to a house in Waterdeep it's a real deed, but that manor house has burned down a long time ago. So it's very, not better Call Saul, but just shady in a con man kind of way. But he's a rogue, so he's in the mix now. And he was asking, are there any old books in here? I'm looking for books that I'm looking for a sheet of paper that would be blank on both sides. And I just gave him a percentage roll, and there weren't. I said, you find some books and this and that, but nothing like that. And he was wanting. He said it's an old con man's trick that you find old paper out of books and you take it if it's blank, and then you can use it to forge documents that have authentically old paper. So anyway, he's very creative like that. So they were just doing stuff like that the night before. The Duodrone, the Modron stayed with Elif. It kind of developed a bit of an attachment to her. And just, stuff like that was going on. Well, the next day they're summoned to these chambers, and they're brought into the chambers. Again, it's King Bruenor, it's his like advisors, some guard, and all the main faction reps, from like the Zentarum and the Order of the Dawn, the Van, I'd have to look them up. There's all the, the Emerald Enclave, the there's all those factions that we went over during the main part of Gauntlgrym when part 2 of this kicks off. So those representatives are there. There's the ones that lent, the Harpers are there, etc. They're the ones that lent aid of various sorts to the expedition, and you have a session or two, if you're following the book, where the players are working with these different faction representatives to bring them over, to convince them, hey, we need to do this expedition, and can we get some help? But the Drow are not there. So that, like religious advisors there, sages are there, the king's court type people, but they're not in a throne room. And again, the Drow weren't there. Now, even though I made it really clear about that, a couple of the players were confused later, like thinking the Drow were in there. And they said that affected how they were talking. And I'm like, I don't know what to say, because I was super clear that the Drow are not in this room. And I went to great lengths to describe that you're not in the throne room, but this feels kind of official and this and that. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because, I was really clear about that. I mean, I went out of my way, and if the players still miss it, I'm like, sorry, I'm not going to let you go back and say you changed something, because on a certain level, it's especially when I'm really going, because I was like, okay, there's no drow, da da da. Uh, you know, it's their responsibility to pay attention on a certain level. So that's why I'm bringing that up. Not that it caused any major issues, but I was like, well, no, there's no drow, and then I just kind of kept going, and they were like, oh well, then I would have. I'm like, well, I said there were no drow, and a couple other people at the table were like, yeah, you said there were no drow. So just another insight into how I DM. Now, if I think I've caused confusion, I may allow a little bit of mulliganing or something, but not very often, unless I'm pretty sure that I goofed the situation up, which can happen. So anyway, so they meet with King Bruenor, and this first meeting, it's kind of a morning meeting. He's just like, tell me everything that's happened since you left here. And he doesn't really prompt. He doesn't ask for, hey, what about that? He doesn't even really ask, speaking of leading questions from viewer feedback time, he doesn't really ask. He just tell me everything that happened. And then he's, okay. And he's like, and then, okay. And then, all right. And then, and so he just lets them tell their tale. And when they get to Mantle Dareth with the thing of, touching the drow with the gem, which has caused this whole kerfluffle, they kind of smooth, they said, oh, well, and then we met and then I did the gem and kept going, and they don't really go into deep details on that, and he doesn't interrupt them, he just listens. And so what King Bruenor is doing is he's looking for the truth. He's looking for anything he can use in his negotiations with the drow, but he's also trying to feel out, what happened? Can he trust these adventurers any longer? Are they going to lie to him? What are they going to do? And it's kind of the, give them enough rope to hang themselves. There's also a Stephen R. Donaldson in the Second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. There's this thing called the Test of Silence, and that's where the Thomas Covenant and I think like one other characters towards the beginning of the second trilogy are in a village, and all the village elders and everything, they just stare at them. And then finally Thomas Covenant's had enough, and he jumps up and he just and he starts yelling, and why are you treating like this? And we've been through that, and we're trying. And they're like, you have failed the test of silence because you've just told us things that incriminate yourself. And it's kind of like that, where King Bruenor is he's learned a few things as king. He's not just an adventurer, and he's just listening and playing out enough rope that if they're going to hang themselves, he's giving them enough rope to do so. So I let the players tell their story, and there were a couple of sticking points. Now, obviously, what happened at Mantle Dareth with the gem that had the Demon Lord inside of it is a major sticking point. But Bruenor just lets it fly. He's just, and then after Mantle Dareth, what happened? After they're obviously done talking about Mantle Dareth, they're like, well, we went to Graven Hollow, and then we went to, the Worm Writhings, and da-da-da. And so there were a couple of points other than the fact that Mantle Dareth really wasn't dug into in this first meeting. One was, when it gets to Graven Hollow and they talk about the vision where it was the drow, the Archmage Gromf Banray of Minzo Bronzin that cast the spell that went horribly wrong, that allowed the Demon Lords to come into the Underdark in the first place, and then that Lolth was involved. Everyone in the room's like, wow, the big revelation. So that was kind of like, whoa. And then the other thing is when they get to the point, they say, we have found an ally. And of course they're talking about Vizran, the drow, basically archmage, but he's not the archmage of Minzo Bronzin. He's been exiled. That's their ally that they're working with on a plan to defeat the Demon Lords. And they basically give as much of this is the plan, this is what we're trying to do, we're going to create a ritual that brings all the Demon Lords together, they're going to fight, and whoever's left over, hopefully they're weak enough to take them out, and all this stuff. But they say we can't reveal who our ally is for very good reasons. And, he specifically asked not to be revealed. And it creates, like people are like, what? Dark muttering and this and that and the other. Um, but, the players stood pretty firm on that. And, I mean, it never got to the point where they were like, tell us or we'll kill you. I don't know what would have happened then. But so after all of that, they basically recap everything up to, killing the beholder and, getting its eye and all of that. And then the refugees, and then they came back to Gauntlgrym because they had been requested to come back to Gauntlgrym. So at that point, Bruenor said, okay, we're going to take a recess and we'll be back, in a couple of hours. And then that's what they did. They went back to their rooms. Oh, a couple of things I forgot to mention during the first meeting. So one of the original founding members of the Vanguard of the Eye, which is their guild, again, this creative player who played Grimy and Daggers, the blind rogue, and all this other stuff, he created a cleric, kind of a scary fire kind of cleric, likes to burn things, burn the truth out of things. Proctor Gamble, and played him for several levels, and then has then gone on to play other characters. But Proctor Gamble's considered one of the founding members of Vanguard of the Eye because he was in, the Lost Mine of Phandelver and all that, and helped found everything. So Proctor Gamble has shown up as an official representative of the guild. So this is also serious to the guild. A guild member has caused big problems. So he's there and, kind of listening and, giving them the old stink eye or, and if they did something cool, he's kind of like, but he's concerned. And the other thing is during the initial meeting, King Bruenor's like, and then he zeroes in on the new player, this sort of rogue who's pretending to be a lord. And he's like, I don't know you. How are you in this? And so the story comes out, I was a slave and I've joined up with this group and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, by the way, I'm of noble blood. And, everyone's like, what? And he rolled a persuasion or a deception roll, which was really good, and produced the papers and everything. And, Bruenor's like, why did you not announce yourself as nobility when you arrived? You have, made it so that I did not have the opportunity for my court to offer you the hospitality that you deserved. And so we had a fun kind of role-playing moment with that. And, he produces the papers and there's looking and, they appear to be genuine and all this. But it also comes out that this player says he's bastard nobility, which among many societies, medieval times, whatever, fantasy worlds or whatever, even bastards are accorded some status among royal courts, depending on, whatever the rules are of the nobility in that land or whatever. Now, bastard, you probably know, but if you don't, bastard literally means like, you're not like it's understood that you are a legitimate son of a noble person or a royal person, but you weren't produced like in marriage, or you weren't produced like by the marriage to the person you're supposed to be married to, this kind of thing. So like you have the blood, but you don't have the official pedigree, like literally the pedigree, like dogs have papers. So, but yeah, you can still be accorded certain status because, you're of the house and all that. So he ends up getting moved when they leave, and he gets moved to a different room, and it's not quite the best rooms. But it's not the rooms that the rest of the group are in. It's almost like what the rooms of like really highly status like merchants would receive. And and we had another fun moment with it where Proctor Gamble is like, how is this person you're saying is in the guild all of a sudden? And the player's like, well, we had him sign the temporary paperwork and all and all of this, and he's like, well, I don't know. And then they're like, he said we could have a manor house in Waterdeep. He's like, okay, well, I'll review that then, and he like takes the deed to the house and kind of like slides it up his sleeve, and we had a lot of fun with that. And then he said, okay, well, he can be on double secret probation right now, and I took that from Animal House, obviously, but he's on I think I called it double secret probation. Yeah, he's on double secret probation papers. Uh, yeah, so they gave he's uh, sort of in the guild, but he hasn't been accepted as a full member yet. But this player is kind of turning into a uh, like he's very good at the honey tongued royal politics stuff. So he actually helped smooth over some of the stuff in the meeting. Like he proved that he knows how to operate in this society. But he's basically a con man. So that was some good role playing that came in. This entire session was role playing, and the entire next session is role playing. The next session's already happened. I'm just going to record it as two different videos. Um, so anyway, so they take a break, and during the break, Eldith is in the chambers as well, right? Remember, she's their NPC from the very beginning. That's very good friends with the players or the player characters. She's been the lieutenant of their party. All of that. She's like their liaison between the party and Gauntlgrym and all these things. Well, she's in the chambers or in this meeting, these official royal chambers that aren't the throne room. Well, during this meeting, the initial meeting as well, they're like, what is this thing? And they're talking about the little modron, the duodrone, and they explain that it appears to know something about a orderer or maybe a maze engine. We're not sure. And they kind of explain that it appears to be a little addled, and that they did lesser restoration and some healing and that. And the king's artificers and the king's clerics and sages, some of them, they're like, well, we will study this creature, and they take it away. And it's kind of looking back at Elif like, oh, like a child, and she actually expressed, the character expressed, like, please don't harm this creature, and her character, the character she plays rarely expresses any sort of sympathy for anything. She's the one that's caused this whole kerfluffle and is very kind of chaotic and, oh well. But for this Modron, she expressed some concern. It was like, please don't. I mean, she's like being genuine. She went out of her way to say, like, my elephant, my character is being genuine. Like, please don't hurt the Modron. So, and King Bruenor said, noted. And he stressed to the clerics and the sages and the artificer, don't do your best not to harm this creature, but at the same time, it could have knowledge that's relevant to, what's going on. Or it seemed the beholder seemed to care anyway. So, and he said, please try to leave it alive. So then that was a nice little, we had a lot of nice little role playing moments. Now, during the recess, they're taken back to their chambers. Remember, they're either meeting with Bruenor or whatever at this point, or they're in their chambers under, with servants. But servants are keeping an eye on them too, because things are tense. So Eldith comes to visit the moon elf warlock Elif, the one that with the mage hand touched the gem to the dark elf in Mantle Dareth. And that turns out that dark elf, she was a representative of House Banray, and House Banray is the most powerful house in Menzoberranzan at this time. So this is a big deal. Plus there's madness, plus they're looking for any excuse to have static with the Jorbs. So, but Eldith visits and says, look, we've gotten to know each other, and I consider you all companions and this and that. She goes, I have my duty to the king, but just my best advice is, this is not done yet, and just tell the truth. That's my best advice to you. I've already done everything I can on your behalf and on the behalf of the party with, interceding with the king and the royal court. And now it's, there's nothing more I can do. Just tell the truth. And then, kind of ended on that. And, the player's like, okay. And then Eldith leaves, and eventually they're summoned back in. So then the king, Bruenor, says, okay, now we have to deal with, the core of the matter, which, I noticed that y'all didn't, well, he didn't say y'all, he's not an Arkansas dwarf, but you didn't really go into detail on this part, but we need to step it back to Mantle Dareth. So tell me more of what happened at Mantle Dareth. And he's like, we're on a razor's edge here. We are on the edge of a knife. It could go, tell me what happened. And so, and he's like, I know that this all seems to be about you. And, he points at the moon elf, Elif, the warlock. So you tell me what happened. And she steps forward and tells the story. And when it comes to the gem touching the drow, she lied. And I'm like, is the DM inside? I'm keeping my poker face up, but I'm like, okay, so how do I keep from killing her now? Because that was kind of me as the DM when I sent Eldith in saying, just tell the truth. Trying to, like, hey, hint, hint, just tell the truth. But anyway, so she lied, which I guess is within her character. But at that point, she's like, the noose on her neck. And Bruenor's like, okay. And then, so everybody else is like just listening. And then the king says, yeah, she says it slipped. It just kind of slipped. I didn't intentionally, it just slipped. And then Bruenor's like, okay. So after she recounts her things, like, anything else you want to add? Nobody else wants to add anything. And then he says, so if that's the truth, you won't mind being subjected to a zone of truth spell. And you could tell the player was like, oh, like they didn't see that coming. And she's like, well, okay. And this was where I'm talking about where they thought there were drow in the room. She's like, well, the reason that I said it was slip, and this was out of character, is because I thought there were drow in there. And I was like, no, it's, one, I told you there were drow in there. I was very clear when we set this scene up, or that there weren't drow in there. And then two, everyone's begging you to tell the truth. This is a very serious matter. So I let it stand as it had happened. And then, so she says, yes, I'll submit to the zone of truth, because she's thinking, well, if I don't submit, then, it's going to even look even worse. So they cast the zone of truth on her. And if you're a willing recipient of a spell, you don't get a saving throw. I don't even remember if you get a saving throw for zone of truth. I'm guessing you do. But if you're a willing participant, there's no saving throw. So the zone of truth went in place. He said, tell me what happened. And she told the real version of events, where she intentionally used the mage hand spell to touch the drow female, the head of the drow enclave. Her name's like something Mazalor. Sirac, I could look it up, but it'll come up a lot in the next video. So the king's like, all right. And so then they said, is there anything else that anybody else wants to add? And so then the bard and the rogue, the honey-tongued rogue, went into action. King, it's possible that she was under the influence of madness when she performed that act. There's a lot of madness right now. We all know that's a problem. And then they also, the drow are acting crazy, and she got touched with the gem. And how do you know that she wasn't, there's not madness among and they're lying, the drow are lying, and all of this stuff, right? Like, yeah, we touched her, but all the other stuff they're saying could be lies, and, there's madness at the root of this and everything. So Bruenor, and I'm sharing more in Bruenor's mind with you than I did with the party, but as Bruenor, I'm thinking, yeah, I think that the dwarf, or this moon elf, did it on purpose just to do it, just some crazy thing. I don't think madness caused it. And two, whether the drow are mad or not, they've got a legitimate pretext for coming after me. But this could give me some cover, right? We all know madness is in the Underdark right now. So this adventurer under madness did what she did, this massive affront to the drow. And then, there's some madness among the drow. So how do we know that what they're saying is true? Right? So he's starting to think, royal, intrigues and Machiavellian politics and all that. How can I work this to our advantage? And what was funny is I'd actually thought earlier in the day, or maybe even the day before, I was like, nobody has brought up the fact that, you know, how mad were the drow, insane are the drow, right? And could that come into play with this drama that's unfolding? So when the player brought it up, I was like, ding, ding, ding. It was like the daily double from Jeopardy, right? It was like the sound plays and the screen flips out, and it's like so I gave him inspiration. I was wondering if somebody's going to bring that up. So I did that kind of out of character, not, as Bruenor. So then so after all of that, and what's funny is that when they were, they were consulting, well, by talking telepathically with this gem, the demon lord trapped in the gem, or using mage hand with the gem, could that have caused madness for Elif, the moon elf, at the root of the problem here? And what's funny is, so I'm like looking for an opportunity to include everybody, and I said, cleric. I said, they turn to you. You're a cleric. They say, would your divine religious knowledge, and she rolled terrible. It's like, but the bard and the rogue both wrote very well, just fast talking, and everyone's like, okay. And even the head cleric, the religious advisor, is like, yeah, I guess it's possible. And yes, king, and all of that. So we had some fun role playing that. Now, so he says, okay, we're going to retire for the evening, and we will reconvene in the morning, and then after that we have to meet with the drow and go through all of that. So he's like, go get some rest, and he says, I will tell you how we're going to handle all this tomorrow, and whether you will continue with the expedition, because there's also been talk of like, are you worthy to continue the expedition? Have you lost the trust of the factions? There's several expedition members have died, and now we've got war almost breaking out and all this. Is that a bigger problem than you're solving for us by being down there? So anyway, so they go to their rooms. I asked if anybody's doing anything. They said not really, but I have two monk characters, and one monk player who is the player that they also do crazy things, and they've lost a lot of characters in this campaign. Said something this day like, I'm getting drunk before we go into this meeting in the morning. Okay. So they reconvene, and Bruenor this time has this, and I totally got this from, I'm pretty sure, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country, where the Klingons use like when they're in court, they have, instead of a gavel, they have like a metal ball, and and smack it and it sparks and all that. And Bruenor has that. And he's like, everybody comes in and he lines everybody up, and he's like, okay, here's how we're going to handle this. And he's like, and he kind of smashes this thing, and, the tone in the room changes, like, this is now official pronouncements. And he's like, okay, so unfortunately, madness, infected the expedition and caused this unfortunate incident. So that madness among Elif and others caused an unfortunate incident. We were down, you were down there investigating the madness after all, and you're not immune to its effects, and it's just a tragedy. And then we're assuming potential madness among the drow has exacerbated this situation. He didn't say exacerbated, whatever, made the situation more dire, made it bigger than it normally would have been, because that still doesn't, deny the fact that we have a diplomatic crisis on our hands. But there we go. He says, the moon elf, Elif, and he pronounces that that due to her actions and her basically lying, there were a lot of rewards promised at the beginning of part 2 of Out of the Abyss, like wealth and estate and property and stuff in Gauntlgrym, and all this stuff to the adventurers, and thereby, on behalf of that, also the guild. So the moon elf Elif will be denied all rewards from Gauntlgrym should she survive the adventure. Also, once the business is completed, she will no longer be welcome in Gauntlgrym. So she's basically banished from Gauntlgrym. That was basically her punishment from the king. And now what's one of the things that their adventuring has given the king a very powerful diplomatic weapon against the drow, which is the fact that the Drow are responsible for releasing the demons into the Underdark, demon lords. They're ultimately the whole problem with all this. So he's got a very strong diplomatic ace in the hole, if you will. So that's kind of working in their favor. Plus, Procter Gamble, the guild, the guild is negotiating and dealing. And then, the adventurers were called together by him basically and sent down there. And they've done some good. They've got a plan, and they've got, all this, and he acknowledges all that. He's like, you have a plan, and, maybe we have a way out of this, and and he says, so he's kind of, again, he's punishing Elif because he's not an idiot. He knows Elif did what she did just to do it, and it really has caused a big problem. And even though they weren't officially representatives of him, again, nobody's an idiot. Everybody knows that he kind of pulled all this together and got the factions together and everybody working together and and they came in through Gauntlgrym and all of this to go into the Underdark on this mission. So even though they can't directly make the case that they work for King Bruenor, I mean, there's a heavy circumstantial case to be made. So the other thing that Bruenor has done is he has his main cleric, cast Greater Restoration on everybody. And he did this for two reasons. One, just in case there was some madness among them. But two, he's like, and this will take care of any madness in the party. So we're not going to have any more problems with madness on this adventure, or this mission, right? So, he's making it clear, this is your get out of jail free card. If you do something like this again, assuming that you want to continue the adventure, that's it. I'm washing my hands of madness being an excuse for anything you do. And he also, because one of the things that this party's really been lacking, they should be high enough level by now that they should have access to the spell. But since they have a larger than normal party, even though I've been bumping up the challenge ratings of stuff and giving out experience at a greater level due to, bumping stuff up, they're only like, I think there's a couple of level 8s. Everybody else is level 7. They don't have access to Greater Restoration yet, unless they go buy it or something. So he gives them 3 scrolls of Greater Restoration. So hopefully that, because there's been times that come up in this adventure where they really, really needed Greater Restoration and they could not, they just didn't have it. So I gave them, Bruenor gave them 3 scrolls of Greater Restoration. And then he's like, hold on a second, let me notes here. So anyway, at that point, he's like, that's how we're going to handle it. And from this point, madness is no longer an issue for your actions. And he's like, and these are my pronouncements. And another thing that was pronounced that he had worked out with the guild, the Vanguard of the Eye, because even though they came as a summons to Gauntlgrym on Bruenor's behalf, they still came as guild members. And, they were on a mission kind of also on behalf of the guild. And the guild, what he negotiated with the guild, it was, Procter Gamble negotiated for, we will give you 1 free, basically, mission, one use of our services as a guild for free, pro bono, basically. So he's got a favor from the guild in his pocket as well. So all things being considered, he's not happy about all of this, but he, it's negotiated on Bruenor's behalf fairly well. And now he has some ammo with the Drow. So all things considered, even though he's still, not totally happy that all this has happened, what's done is done. And he's like, and he smacks the iron ball, sphere, and then they stand up. And he's like, and now we have to go meet with the Drow in my throne room. And he says, if any of you, and he looks at all of them, says, if any of you disrupt this Drow meeting, my kingdom is hanging by a thread, by a dagger's edge, diplomatically and possibly with outright war coming. Said, if any of you disrupt this meeting or make things worse, I will have you executed. And I mean, he's serious. He's like, I will have you executed. It's like, the only reason you're even coming is because the Drow demanded. So, and that's kind of where things ended. And so next session, they'll be they did go to the throne. They did go to the throne room, and he walked in, and the crier, I described all the major houses were there of the drow. All the faction reps are there. The royal court is in attendance. And, the crier, the throne room announcer, whatever, King Bruenor, may his beard never gray, is now holding court. And then, Bruenor sits down and rings the iron thing on the edge of his throne arm, chair, the arm on his throne. And that's where we ended. And they also saw among House Bonray, they saw the drow, some Cyrilak Mazalor or something like that, whatever her name is, among them, and she's just staring daggers at Elif. So that's where we ended. And one thing to note is one of my players had said before, before I said all this stuff about, if any of you disrupt this meeting, I will kill you. Because at this point, he's a king. His kingdom comes before any individual party member. And, the drow are insisting that the party's there because they were part of the incident. And so, diplomatically, they're going to be there. But he's like, if you make this harder for me, or if you cause any problems, I will kill you. So he's not playing around. He's a king at this point. Even though his adventurer's heart interceded a little bit for him in these somewhat less formal meetings before he pronounced what he would do with the guild and with Elif and all of that. And they went in there. That's where we ended things. Now, one player did tell me that he said he got drunk. He was stupid drunk. And I'm like, okay. And he had said something like, there might be times where I roll percentile dice, and if it's 50% or less, I may do something dumb. I'm like, okay. And that's not why I said the thing about Bruenor. I just said, Bruenor's not playing around. And he was like, oh, I wish I'd have known that. And I'm like, well, you said it, and you said you were going drunk into an incredibly formal, diplomatic, tense situation. That's on you, man. You have those players. I was like, well, if I would have known, it's like, man, no, you're playing your character how you're playing your character. But anyway, that will come into play next time. Not that I wanted it to. I wasn't trying to have that happen, but it will come into play next time. And we'll also talk about whether greater or lesser restoration will cure drunkenness. And we'll talk about that some on next video. Anyway, so that was part one of the two-parter homebrew kind of side story subplot in my version of Out of the Abyss. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays, and please feel free to leave a comment or a question and a thumbs up on the video. That helps me tremendously. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays.